Hello everyone, I'm very sorry for the big break between the videos, but stuff happens. Last month I did a video where I showed you some tricks about how to beat every of the core set villains from Marvel Champions LCG without a lot of struggle, and this time I'm going to deep into Cycle 1 expansion villains, being Norman Osborn, Green Goblin and the Wrecking Crew. While two of those are way easier than most of the other scenarios, they still can be a hindrance in Heroic, and where using some tricks to beat the scenarios might be very helpful. And I'm looking to make a video like this for each villain in the game. If you're new to the game or still looking for some strategy tips, I hope you will get to use some of those. First off, Norman Osborn. This guy is insanely easy to play around in a variety of ways. He has a lot of cards in his kit that amount to pretty much nothing, being private security specialist, all in day's work, and his schemes are also harmless if you have at least a bit of thwart, so no Hulk. Pretty much only ace up his sleeve is dealing damage by flipping to an unsuspecting player. The first tip I have for anyone wanting to play the best versus him is playing around his flipping. When he's Norman Osborn, you will want to be in hero form so his action doesn't amount to much, and when he's in Goblin mode, you will generally want to finish your turn in Alter Ego so his rampage ends and he goes back to being harmless Norman. The second tip is very related to number one, but you can abuse Norman Osborn's mechanics to build yourself up. When you stay in hero form while he's Norman Osborn, his attacks change into him gaining 2 or 3 virtual hit points. And you can just stay in hero form, focus on threat and minions, and keep playing your upgrades, keep playing your supports, and Norman has no way to hurt you whatsoever. And after you build yourself up with Mansion, Carrier, your special economy cards, your turns will become explosive to the point that there is no stopping you. And about explosive turns, the third tip is to go for explosive damage rather than pinging him down. After a while, when you're built up and when you have the game under your control, you will want to move to offensive. And the best way to do that is to first set up Criminal Enterprise to be at 1 or 2 tokens, so it doesn't hold you back. And then, the round after you do that, you go all out on damage, preferably knocking his whole first form in a single round. Don't bother flipping him to deal 5 or 8 damage. Flip him when you can play multiple attacks and just finish him the same round or the round after. And the fourth tip would be to not allow him to progress past stage 1. It's really not hard, and it gives you another incentive to just stay in hero form for 99% of the scenario. An additional card is one of the worst effects in the game, because even ordinary stuff can just overwhelm you. Prioritize keeping the main scheme on 0 threat. And finally, protection is useless in this scenario. When he's Green Goblin, you will want to go all out on damage rather than defend, and extra healing or energy barriers could prove useful, but it's really better to just forget protection exists while playing Norman Osborn. The second villain from the same box is the Green Goblin himself, this time without his alter ego Norman. And Mutagen Formula, because that's the name of the scenario, is probably one of the hardest scenarios in the game, probably second hardest right after Zola, but argument could be made for Mutagen being harder in some instances. It's a scenario in which the villain pretty much assumes control turn 1, and you are left to handle the consequences if you survive. So there's a lot of minions here you will need to handle, as you see, but perhaps the most oppressive is the Green Goblin himself, making you effectively reveal 3 encounter cards the first round and 4 encounter cards per player when you advance. He also has some pretty swingy treacheries like Wicked Ambitions, which could just outright lose you the game if you're unlucky enough. He also has extra activations, which always makes a villain stronger, but his ones are premium. One gives him plus scheme or plus attack equal to the stage number, which could be game ending, and overconfidence is surging and allowing him to potentially activate the third time. And have I mentioned that every time Green Goblin damages you, he also puts 1 threat out, making staying in hero form not the perfect counter to threat increases? Yeah, so he's pretty nasty. The first tip to dealing with him is to plan your game plan since the deck building phase to brace for impact in the first turn. You need to have a solid plan about how you want to approach the fact that free encounter cards are coming at you in a moment and he might advance the scheme or you might die. You probably want ways to remove 2 threat per player from the scheme at the start, so you either want a hero with a lot of threat removal in their set or a simple base 2 thwart skill like Cap or Natasha. From here, you can either play an ally for extra protection or you can kill off Goblin Thrall and then stun or confuse Green Goblin to gain some time. But you need your deck figured for this very first turn, and you probably don't want to be playing economy with no tempo this round. The second tip is pretty obvious: bring a lot of minion control. It's very important. Cards like Melee become absolutely premium in this matchup. Hall of Heroes will trigger every other round. You know the drill. Aggression is the best for this, and one player on the board should probably have it. But if it's not an option, cards like Stealth Strike will do the job. Max out on all of them. Heroes with area of effect like Black Panther can help out in clearing a lot more efficiently. The third tip is that advancing to stage 2 of the scheme is not all that bad, and this is a multiplayer only tip. To elaborate, it's not that bad if you have minions under control, as mentioned earlier. Very often the only Goblin in play will be the villain himself, making him actually output less threat than on stage 1. Later in the game, when players have assumed control, if you want to be able to focus more on beating the villain and save yourself 1 or 2 threat around, advancing might not be a terrible idea. Also about advancing, picking the right moment to advance to stage 3 of the villain is more relevant here than ever. The moment you advance, 3 extra cards per player will absolutely swing the tempo back into Goblin's favor, and there is no going around this. The turn you advance, you need a rather clear board, no minions, not more than a few threat on the scheme, and each player ready to survive a beating of around 8 damage each player. Preferably with an ally to block the third unexpected attack as well. And finally, take it slow. This scenario is an absolute grind and might take hours, especially in 3 or 4 player games. Don't get discouraged that the villain didn't take a single hit for 4 rounds. And don't let it force you into suboptimal plays, because you want to damage the villain, you want to push the game to an end. You cannot let that happen. You need to play the most efficient stuff you can and assume the control of the game very slowly. This scenario is specific because you will need to assume that control twice, not once, unlike most of the villains right now. If you keep on going for expansion and control, you will eventually come out on top. So the next scenario isn't even in the same league as Goblin, and is considered a rather peaceful one. I'm talking about the Wrecking Crew, of course. To give you a taste of the difference of the difficulty, Crew on Heroic is roughly the same, as far as I'm aware, as Goblin on Expert. And each of the Wrecking Crew guys has his own little deck. Some have better stuff, others not so much. And what's common between them is a Surge minion, a Guard minion, Buddy system, which is basically Surge, Held Hostage, I've been waiting for this, and Chaos in Prison. Other than that, each villain has his own card set. And they mostly have some threat raises, extra activations, direct damage with some weapons thrown in, and some shenanigans with changing the active villain. They are pretty straightforward. And with introductions out of the way, let's go into ways they could be destroyed. First of all, control the villain activations. Whatever villain activates is dependent on whatever scheme has the most threat at the moment. What's the best about it is that you, the player, are totally in charge which villain will activate. Usually letting PILEDRIVER activate is the easiest if you can be certain he won't finish his scheme. You can keep other schemes at 0 and his scheme at 1 threat. If the players in hero form don't have an army of allies, letting Thunderbolt also isn't a bad idea. Same goes for Bulldozer if you're tanking hits anyway. The takeaway from this is that you need to think which villain you will let activate and plan accordingly, maybe stunning and confusing for good measure as well. And the second tip is pretty strange, but from my experience it's always good to kill the villain holding the hostage rather than taking an extra attack. Held hostage coming out of the deck is the villain painting a big target from themselves, as it will often be easier to just focus him down rather than deal with repercussions of an extra activation and clearing the scheme. It won't always be possible, so don't make it a hard rule, but when you're ahead, focusing down the villain holding hostage is the way to go. The first tip is very scenario specific, and it's don't rely on allies to do anything. This is interestingly enough one of those scenarios where going classic leadership is probably not the cleanest way to victory. It will probably win anyways, but there are so many ways they can die to retaliate, Thunderbolt, many of the area of effects, so you should only bring allies that bring you enough value the exact turn they enter play, like Nick Fury. And the fourth tip, leave PILEDRIVER for last. He will take you the most time, with you needing to heal in between attacks, and he has cards giving him extra hit points or tough status. You should probably actually take care of tough status anyway, but if you can kill another villain first, go for it. And finally, pick your battles with side schemes. This is one of the scenarios that can be rushed rather than necessarily controlled. For example, rather than thwarting Day of Reckoning, if you can survive the incoming attack, leaving it to fire and allowing yourself to focus on bigger concerns at the moment is a smart play. Same goes for Clear the Road, which is probably the least impactful of the schemes. You should focus your attention on Pile It On, as it really ruins your momentum. So that will be all. I will be doing Red Skull Box next, and some lot content as well. And if you have any feedback, leave it in the comments. Thanks for watching, stay safe, hope you will beat any villains in your way, and I will see you guys in the next one.